All right, today we are going to break down one of the most jaw-droppingly lopsided battles in all of Roman history. We're talking about a clash where tactics, tech, and just pure ruthlessness all came together on a field in ancient Britain. So yeah, let's get right into it.
80,000. That's the estimated number of Britons killed in a single day. We're not just talking about warriors here, we're talking about women, children, a huge part of the rebel force just gone. It's a scale of loss that's almost impossible to wrap your head around.
And on the other side, 400. That's it. 400 Roman soldiers died in that same fight. I mean, just look at those two numbers side by side. The difference is absolutely staggering. This tells you it wasn't just a battle, it was a methodical, almost industrial slaughter.
So that brings us to the big question, right? How on earth was this possible? How could an army, outnumbered at least 8-1, maybe even more, pull off such an unbelievably devastating victory? Well, that's the puzzle we're going to solve today. And it all starts with the spark that ignited this whole rebellion.
You know, this whole conflict didn't start as a war for land or anything like that. Nope. This was a war born from pure humiliation, greed, and the absolute fury of a queen who was just pushed way, way too far.
So the whole thing actually kicked off with what was supposed to be a smart political move. Boudica's husband, the king of the Iceni tribe, his name was Prasutagus. He was what you'd call a client king of Rome, basically a local ruler who worked with the empire. When he was on his deathbed, he tried to keep the peace. He wrote a will leaving his kingdom to both his daughters and to the Emperor Nero. This was actually a pretty common thing to do back then, a way to make sure the transition of power went smoothly.
But the local Roman officials on the ground, yeah, they saw something totally different. They saw a golden opportunity for profit, not peace. They just completely ignored the will. They basically declared the kingdom was now Roman property, started grabbing up land, and, to make things even worse, powerful Roman financiers, like the famous philosopher Seneca the Younger, suddenly called in these huge loans they'd given to the Briton nobles. I mean, overnight, the Iceni were being financially strangled.
And when Queen Boudica dared to protest this, to stand up for her people, the Roman response was just brutal. And it was calculated to be as degrading as possible. They weren't just trying to shut down a protest, they were trying to shatter the spirit of an entire people by violating their queen. She was dragged out and publicly flogged, whipped like a common slave. And her two young daughters? They were raped by Roman soldiers. This is what turned a political fight into a raw, deeply personal quest for bloody revenge.
And that vengeance, oh, it was swift and it was absolutely terrible. Boudica rallied the Iceni and other nearby tribes, and they unleashed total hell across Roman Britain. Their first target was Camulodunum, modern-day Colchester, a settlement for retired Roman soldiers. They sacked it. When the 9th Legion raced in to stop them, they were ambushed and pretty much wiped out. From there, the rebels marched on Londinium, the province's booming commercial center, and then Verulamium. They burned them so completely that even today, archaeologists can literally see a thick red layer of ash in the ground they call the Boudica destruction horizon. We're talking about an estimated 70,000 Romans and their allies killed in just a few months.
So you can imagine the panic. The Roman governor, a guy named Gaius Suetonius Paulinus, had to cut short his campaign in Wales and just race back to deal with this massive existential threat. And the two armies that were about to face off, well, they couldn't have been more different.
Okay, just take a second to really look at these numbers. It's just a wild difference. Suetonius, the Roman commander, scraped together about 10,000 troops. A decent army for sure. But Boudica? The ancient historians claim she had something like 230,000 warriors. Now, look, maybe those numbers are a little exaggerated for dramatic effect, but even the most conservative modern estimates say the Romans were outnumbered at least 8-1. They were just hopelessly, terrifyingly outgunned.
But here's the thing. It wasn't just about the sheer number of people. It was a total clash of fighting styles, a clash of philosophies. On one side, you have the Roman legionary. This guy is a full-time, professional soldier. He's got standardized armor, he's trained to fight in these incredibly disciplined formations, and he works as part of a single deadly unit. His weapons, the short gladius for stabbing up close, and the pilum javelin are all about efficiency. And on the other side, you've got the Briton warrior. These guys were brave, no doubt about it, but they were a tribal army. Most were poorly equipped, they fought as individuals looking for personal glory, and they used these long swords that needed a lot of room to swing effectively. Two completely different worlds.
So Suetonius knew, he absolutely knew he couldn't win a straight-up open field battle. No way. His only shot was to take the Britons' biggest advantage, their overwhelming numbers, and somehow turn it into their biggest weakness. And the way he did it?
was by picking the perfect battlefield.
See, he didn't let Boudica dictate the terms. He didn't get cornered. Instead, he marched his army until he found the exact spot he wanted. That single decision, to control the when and the where of this final showdown, was probably the most important move he made.
And this is where you really see his tactical genius at play. He found a narrow gorge or a defile with a thick forest at his back so no one could sneak up behind him. The sides of the gorge were sloped, which protected his flanks. What does that mean? It means the Britons couldn't surround him. They had no choice but to attack him head-on. He literally created a funnel, forcing this massive horde of warriors to squeeze into a tight, narrow kill zone. It was the perfect setup for the disciplined Roman war machine to just go to work.
And his speech to his soldiers before the battle, the one the historian Tacitus wrote down, it was so Roman. It was brutally practical. There was no flowery talk about glory or honor. It was just cold, hard instructions. He basically said, ignore all the noise and shouting. Stick together. Throw your javelins, then push forward. Don't worry about loot. Just win, and you'll get everything. Simple as that.
So picture this. The Britons are chanting, screaming, working themselves into a battle rage, and they start charging up this slope towards the silent Roman line. The Romans just stand there and wait. When the massive wave of warriors gets to about 30 meters away, they let loose. Thousands of heavy javelins, the pila, fly through the air, and these things were clever. They weren't just for killing. They had a long, soft iron bit at the end, so when one hit a wooden shield, it would punch right through, and then the weight of the javelin would cause that iron bit to bend. All of a sudden, your shield is useless. It's got this heavy, bent piece of metal hanging off it. In a single moment, thousands of Briton warriors just had their main defense completely neutralized.
After another volley, the Romans started to move. But they didn't charge. They advanced. They marched forward in these tight, wedge-shaped formations. It was like a disciplined human mincing machine. One guy smashes an enemy with his shield, and the guy right next to him stabs with his short sword. It was a system. They just methodically pushed forward, breaking the Briton lines, while the Britons themselves were packed in so tight they didn't even have room to swing their big, long swords.
And this is the final fatal mistake. The Britons were so sure they were going to win that they had brought their families to watch. They had set up all their supply wagons in this big crescent shape behind their army, like a grand stand to watch the Romans get wiped out. But when the Roman wedges broke their lines and the Britons started to fall back, that grandstand became a wall. It became a trap. The fleeing warriors ran right into their own wagons and got stuck. The escape route was completely blocked. A retreat turned into an absolute, inescapable massacre.
What happened next was just a complete bloodbath. You have to remember, these Roman soldiers had been trapped in a hostile land for months. They had seen their cities burned, their friends and families killed. They gave no quarter. They killed everyone.
I mean, the final numbers really say it all. The historian Tacitus reports around 80,000 Britons were killed. That includes warriors, women, even their pack animals were slaughtered. And the Roman losses? Just 400 soldiers. It's one of the most incredibly one-sided victories you'll ever read about in military history. And what about the warrior queen at the center of it all? Well, this is where her story gets a bit hazy. Tacitus wrote that she took poison, choosing to die rather than be captured and paraded through Rome in chains. Another historian, Catus Decianus, says she just got sick and died, and her people gave her this lavish burial. The truth is, we don't know. Her final resting place has never been found, which, of course, has led to all kinds of legends. There's even one that says she's buried under Platform 10 at King's Cross Station in London.
You really can't overstate how close the Romans came to losing Britain entirely. This rebellion shook them to their core. The Emperor Nero was apparently seriously thinking about just abandoning the whole island. But the victory at Watling Street was so total, so absolute, that it just crushed the will to fight in southern Britain, and it secured Roman rule there for the next 350 years. Okay, so let's bring it all back to that first question we asked. How did this happen? How was this seemingly impossible victory even achieved?
So when you boil it all down, how did 10,000 guys beat an army of maybe 200,000? It wasn't a miracle. It was a system. It was the rock-solid discipline of a professional army going up against a passionate but chaotic mob. It was the technological advantage of their weapons and armor. It was the absolute brilliance of a general who used the terrain to flip the script. And in the end, it was sealed by a tragic, fatal mistake by the Britons themselves, that overconfidence that turned their cheering section into a death trap.
Look, the Battle of Watling Street is so much more than just a famous event in a history book. It's a really brutal case study in the cold, hard math of warfare.
On one side, Boudica had the passion, she had the numbers, she had righteous fury. On the other, the Romans had a system, they had better tech, and they had the perfect piece of land. And it really leaves you with this big question that we see again and again throughout history. When a rebellion fueled by pure passion and anger goes up against the cold, calculating logic of a military machine, is the outcome ever really in doubt?